The quantum dimension. In the quantum dimension, death would be a probability wave. You wouldn't simply die. Instead, you would exist in a superposition of being both alive and dead simultaneously, like Schrödinger's cat, until observed by another consciousness. At that moment, the wave function would collapse, and you would either be fully alive or completely dead, with no in-between state. The terrifying part is that you would be aware of both states until the moment of observation, experiencing the agony of death while simultaneously feeling perfectly healthy.
The temporal dimension.
In the temporal dimension, death would stretch across time itself. You wouldn't die at a single moment, but would experience your death across multiple timelines simultaneously. Your consciousness would fragment, watching yourself die as a child from disease, die as an adult from an accident, and die as an elderly person from old age, all at once. Your mind would struggle to process these overlapping death experiences, creating a torturous loop of dying and being born again across different ages of your life.
The information dimension.
In the information dimension, death would present as data corruption. Your consciousness exists as pure information, and death would be like a computer virus, slowly deleting your memories, personality, and thoughts piece by piece. You would be aware of losing yourself bit by bit, first forgetting your childhood, then your loved ones, then your own name, until nothing remains but an empty shell of corrupted data. Eventually, even the awareness of forgetting would be deleted, leaving behind only fragments of meaningless code.
The probability dimension.
In the probability dimension, death would be determined by cosmic dice rolls. Every second, your survival would depend on quantum probability calculations. Most versions of you would continue living, but some would randomly cease to exist for no reason at all. You would constantly feel the weight of knowing that in countless other realities, you had already died from the most mundane activities, like walking downstairs or drinking water. The anxiety of knowing your death was always just one unlucky probability away would be unbearable.
The consciousness dimension.
In the consciousness dimension, death would reverse everything we know about death. Instead of losing awareness, death would mean gaining infinite consciousness. You would become aware of every death that has ever occurred and ever will occur. Your mind would be flooded with the final moments of every living being across all realities. The overwhelming flood of death experiences from trillions of creatures would drive you insane as you simultaneously experienced being eaten alive by predators, dying from diseases, burning in fires, drowning in oceans, and countless other ways to die, all at once.
The mirror dimension.
In the mirror dimension, death would be recursive. You would watch yourself die, but your reflection would also be dying, and that reflection's reflection would be dying, creating an endless loop of death experiences. Each reflection would die in a slightly different way, and you would experience them all simultaneously. The recursive nature means that each death would reflect back on itself, creating an endless cascade of dying versions of yourself, each one a slightly more distorted and horrifying than the last.
The dimension of pure thought.
In the dimension of pure thought, death would make death a philosophical paradox. Since only thoughts exist, death would be the inability to think. But if you can't think, then you can't be aware that you're dead. This creates a logical loop where death is impossible because the act of being dead requires consciousness to recognize it. But consciousness means you're not dead. You would be trapped in an eternal state of almost death, perpetually on the edge of non-existence, but never able to cross over.
The emotional dimension.
In the emotional dimension, death would be the ultimate feeling. You wouldn't stop existing, but would instead become pure, concentrated death emotion. This would be more intense than any physical pain, as you would experience the raw emotional essence of what death feels like to every living creature. The fear, desperation, sadness, and acceptance of death would overwhelm your consciousness until you became a living embodiment of the concept of death itself, while still being technically alive.
The paradox dimension.
In the paradox dimension, death would make death simultaneously meaningless and the most important thing in existence. You would die and not die at the same time, creating a paradox that breaks the fundamental laws of that reality. Your death would cause you to become more alive than ever before, while also being completely dead. This contradiction would create a feedback loop, where dying makes you more alive, which makes you die more, which makes you more alive, creating an impossible state of being.
The memory dimension.
In the memory dimension, death would mean forgetting and being forgotten. You would die by having every memory of your existence erased from every mind that ever knew you. This includes your own memories, so you would watch yourself disappear from your own mind while simultaneously forgetting that you ever existed. The horror lies in the brief moment of awareness as the last memory of yourself is deleted, and you realize you never existed at all.
The collective consciousness dimension.
In the collective consciousness dimension, death would mean disconnection from the universal mind. Every being in this dimension shares thoughts and experiences, so death would be the terrifying isolation of being cut off from the collective. You would retain your individual consciousness, but lose all connection to others, experiencing the ultimate loneliness as the only aware being in existence. The silence after a lifetime of shared thoughts would be deafening.
The artistic dimension.
In the artistic dimension, death would make death a performance piece. You would die in increasingly elaborate and artistic ways, as if death were a form of creative expression. Your death need to be beautiful, meaningful, and worthy of an audience. Each death would be judged on its artistic merit, and you would need to die in a way that contributes to the cosmic art gallery of deaths. If your death wasn't artistic enough, you would be forced to die again and again until you achieved the perfect death performance.
The mathematical dimension.
In the mathematical dimension, death would be a calculation error. Your existence would be represented by complex equations, and death would occur when these equations no longer balance. You would feel yourself becoming mathematically impossible as the numbers that define your existence stop adding up. The process would be like slowly realizing you're a mistake in reality's mathematics, waiting to be corrected by some cosmic calculator. The dream dimension. In the dream dimension, death would blur the line between death and sleep. You would die by falling into an eternal dream, but remain aware that you're dreaming. The nightmare would be knowing you're dead, but being unable to wake up, trapped in a dream version of death that feels real but isn't. You would experience false awakenings where you think you've escaped death, only to realize you're still in the death dream, creating layers of nested death experiences.
The pure energy dimension.
And finally, in the dimension of pure energy, death would be entropy incarnate. You would slowly lose cohesion as your energy disperses across the universe. The process would be gradual, and you would remain conscious as parts of yourself scatter to the far reaches of reality. You would feel pieces of your consciousness drifting away like smoke, until you become spread so thin across the universe that you exist everywhere and nowhere simultaneously.